Hello and welcome to Lecture 5 or Unit 5 of the series of lectures on Supply Chain Risk Management as a course. It is always important to remind ourselves that this is risk analysis and risk management as applies to the supply chain. And therefore, you will find that it is significantly different from risk management in finance or risk management in insurance, except that the basic principles are similar and can apply to all. In this unit, our aim is to look at supply chain, analyzing supply chain risk. We want to look at how do we measure risk? How do we find the likelihood of an event occurring? What do we call consequence? Then, how do we evaluate the consequences? And we then look at the tools for risk analysis. Now, is risk analysis important? What is the essence? And generally, if we talk about essence of risk analysis, it is looking at the register of risks. So, we want to find out what is the register of risks. And unfortunately, there is no standard. Every organization develops their own. On the whole, everybody is expected, or every risk register is expected to identify the types of risk. Then you look at the triggers. What are the things that can bring this risk about? Then what is the likelihood of occurrence? Then what is the consequence? What are the mitigation strategies? What mitigation strategies do you have in place? Then you can have remarks. Basically, a risk register is supposed to have this basic information. So, we can find the expected value of each risk. And generally, expected value is determined by multiplying the likelihood times the consequence. Remember that the likelihood is usually based on probabilities. What is the probability of this occurring? And when it occurs, what is likely to happen? Then we use this to assign priorities to each of them, where we can identify some as high risk, medium risk, low risk. So, in your risk register, if you want to make it big, you can look at type of risk, triggers, likelihood, consequence. Maybe before you get to mitigation, you have priorities. So your risk register can be big, it can be small. It depends on the demeanor of the organization. But it is important to note that every organization must have a risk register. It is extremely important. Otherwise, you are going to be caught pants down, as it is normally said. Pants down, no preparation. The risk event has occurred. You are running helter-skelter to look for a solution. And the whole aim of all this measuring and analysis of risk is to identify the ones that need the most attention. Very key. So you can have a table like this, where you look at the identification number of the risk, the date it was recognized. You see that these ones will refer to generally risks that have normally even occurred. You can also use this same matrix to be able to develop your risk register. This is a variation of what I have on the board. So you have date recognized. Who is the owner? Who is responsible? You are placing responsibility on somebody's head. What is the description of the risk? What is the impact of the risk? Remember that impact is also what? Consequence. Sometimes, if we want to look at what happens when the risk event occurs, we look at the consequence. Then the probability is the likelihood. So you see that risk registers generally have common features irrespective of how you want to go about doing it. And the organization, the particular kind of business that the organization is engaged in, should normally describe or influence the kind of risk register it will have. This one describes a two-side register that has a summary and a description. Yours can be very different. The one I have on the board is very different from this. They are all forms of risk registers, and there is no right or wrong one. The needs of your organization should normally dictate the kind of register you want to keep and what comes in the heading. Except that for the basic, everybody should be able to know the kind of risk, the likelihood, the consequence. What priority are you giving it? What is the mitigation strategy? The whole idea is that anybody who comes to your organization and takes your risk register should understand what the organization wants him or her to do in the event of a risk event. So when you come to KNUSC and you take our risk register, we have one. When you take our risk register, then as a new worker, you'll be able to appreciate that when this happens, this is what you should do. When this happens, this is what you should do. When this happens, this is what you should do. And it makes life easy for you. So what is the procedure for next analysis? First, so we have looked at the register of risks. And we have agreed that you can keep it depending on how you want it to be. Now, you can come to risk analysis. So we have input. What goes into it? Then, this leads us to tools. What can we do? So, from the inputs, we go to the tools, and then we go to the outputs. So here, when we talk about the inputs, what are the things that should help us to begin to analyze the risk? And we are saying that the risk register is the first point of call. In it, you will have the likelihood if you did it well, and then you also have consequence. Then, when you come to risk and procedures, your aim is to what? Assess the significance. So you assess the significance of the risk and assign them to categories. So assess significance of the risk. assign to categories. Some will just call it high risk, medium risk, low risk. Some will call it organizational risk, internal risk, inherent external risk, environmental risk, process risk, and so on. So you are going to assess the significance of the risk and assign them to categories for a better understanding. Then you order risks based on what? Based on significance and attention needed. Order risks based on significance and attention needed. What kind of attention do I need to pay to this risk? Normally, it will come from the category that the risk belongs to. If you are categorizing it based on high, medium, and low, then of course, those in the high category will demand a lot of attention because they are the ones that have significant impacts when they occur. Then, if you are talking about low risk, then you know acceptability is what is required. You really don't need to pay too much attention to them. You just know they exist, they can occur, and then you can think of what to do. So, when you have taken your time to go through this, then you have analyzed the risk. Now, after you have analyzed the risk, what are the two approaches? When you have done this, what two approaches can you use to try and further your analysis of the risk? Of course, you know we can do two of them. So, approaches. Approaches to what? Risk analysis. In fact, these same approaches can be approaches for data analysis in research. These are generic. We have qualitative, that is based on intuition and soft factors, and quantitative, that is based on numerical data or numerical factors. Now, let's go to the qualitative approach. You see, this one takes the risk register and describes the features of each entry. So look at it. We have nature of the risk, so type of risk. You describe it. What is the consequence? This one, we are going to look at the non-numeric view of the potential profit and gains and losses and gains. Should this happen, what do we lose? What do we gain? So, we are painters. We are a painting company. What is the nature of the risk we face? Accident due to falling. What is the consequence? Death. Significant injury. Beyond that, beyond the person's family, social consequence comes in. Environmental consequence comes because people will begin to perceive our company as unsafe. But what is the likelihood of this falling occurring? So we are going to give it a subjective view of whether the risk will materialize. So we can look at all the preparations we have done, the way we use scaffolds, the way we do this, and say, oh, this is not likely to occur. Or even if it is likely to occur, we will put it at 20%. The reason why it is subjective is that when you say 20% chance, what does it mean? What is 20? If it will happen, bam, in one breath, it has happened. So, when we say it is subjective, it means that you are going to use experience, you are going to use other knowledge that you know, or your things that have happened around you or people around you to kind of give it a certain likelihood that you yourself cannot defend scientifically. That's why it's subjective. Then we look at scope. So when this falling occurs, whether it is 10%, 20%, what areas will be affected? So the person involved himself will be affected. Other workers will be affected. The person's company will be affected. Now, beyond that, how can supplies be affected? The person is injured. Maybe the entire work comes to a halt. We will not place any orders. Deliveries may take too much time. We may go beyond the date we said we will finish. It will bring us additional costs. We may have to get services because we'll take this person to the hospital. So we identify the scope and we look at responsibility, ownership of the risk, and responsibility for its control. Who must we hold responsible? How do we make sure that this is controlled so that it doesn't occur again? Who are the people affected? So in this case, responsibility, we can hold the supervisor on duty's neck because it was the person's job to see that the scaffold has been fixed correctly and the people working follow all the protocols. How do we make sure it doesn't occur again? We have to review the protocols, maybe do a training again, maybe a 1-hour training, a reminder. Then we look at stakeholders, those who can be affected by the risk. You see, so the workers, the family of the workers, we those in the company, the clients. And then we look at their expectations. What is the objective? What are we trying to achieve? A risk-free business. To continue our painting without accident, without delays, achieve our aim, take our money, pay everybody, and everybody is happy. If it actually occurs, what are the subsequent changes we must do to operations so that we mitigate the effect of this risk or we prevent it from occurring again? So now we are going to sit down and brainstorm. What went wrong? Who didn't do what they should do? What changes can we introduce to make sure next time around they do what they are supposed to do? So then we look at the current methods that we have put in place to manage risk. How successful have they been? Maybe we have decided that to manage risk at this time, when the scaffold is set, somebody must shake it to see that no part of it is loose. Now the person climbing it must climb in stages. The person must climb to a level, shake, climb again to another level, shake, climb to where they have to work. When they get to work, they hold something and test it first before they free themselves to, has it been successful? Was it applied and yet we still had the accident? Then we now invite suggestions for improvement. The people working know better than us what caused the accident or what can cause the accident. So what suggestions will they give us? How do we translate that into policy? Remember that when you have suggestions, they remain suggestions and unbinding until you have made it a policy. So let me take the risk of sex for grades. To the extent that men are involved in the teaching, women are involved in the teaching, and we all have feelings. That tendency for people to get attracted to the opposite sex during the whole process of delivery or education is there. Now, there is also the tendency for those who are in the position of power to use this power to coerce those who are weak to kowtow to some of the things they want them to do. So we can have male lecturers harassing female students or female lecturers harassing male students. Big risk. Now, look at the qualitative approach. So what is the nature of this risk? The nature of the risk is that people with power can use that power to coerce or influence or force people who are weak to kowtow to their demands. So who are the people with power here? Examiners, lecturers. Who are the weak ones here? the students. What is the consequence should it happen? Loss of self-esteem, damage to the reputation of the university, and in fact, a total disregard for some of the products of the university. Because if people believe that you can use your body to get the grade, why should they respect you if you graduate from the university? What are the gains? None. In my opinion, where these kind of things go unpunished, the gain is zero. Perhaps the gain will be to those perpetrating the crime for achieving their aim. We can't call this a gain. It's a stupid gain. So what is the likelihood of its occurrence? This is where you are going to have spies. This is where you are going to put in systems that are likely to help the students come forward and complain when this thing is happening. What is the scope? So we are now looking at areas affected. You see that here we wouldn't need supplies. We wouldn't talk of deliveries. There's no cost. It's service. So it is the service. So this thing can only happen when examiners have the free will to just decide how much marks to give somebody. And to the extent that they are allowed to come into contact with this somebody during the marking. So that is the scope. Now, responsibility. Who is responsible? Heads of department. If you are head of department, you are responsible for monitoring your lecturers, both male and female, and making sure that none of them takes advantage of anybody. Then in addition, you create avenues through which students who fall victims can come forward, complain, and then the matter will be dealt with to the close without any further damage or effect to the student or the complainant. That is the control. Now, who are the people who can be affected by this? You will realize that we have the lecturers who do it because they can lose their jobs and cause a lot of misery to their families. Can you imagine a lecturer's wife hearing that the lecturer has been involved in sex for grades and the name is on the news everywhere, her friends, her colleagues just chastising her, or even a female lecturer harassing a male student? And I mean, you can imagine. So the families of these people, the people themselves, the students, the families of the students, the other members of the university community. Because I can tell you, when BBC talked about sex for grades, I felt so bad. I was sitting behind the TV and I couldn't move because it is news. Of course, we hear some of them, but the way they present it is as if, oh, they have done massive investigation. They have uncovered everything. Then you finish watching it and you are like, after 9 months of investigation, you were able to get only two people who is not even clear, because there was no proof in the video of any sex for grade. Whether what they did in the video was appropriate or not is a subject for another day. But this one, the caption was sex for grade, and they said it was so rampant. So you can imagine how I felt. I am not an angel. I am not a saint. But at least I know I don't do that. So when you hear some of these things, of course it affects you. I'm a stakeholder. You can imagine how the VC will feel. So now, to manage this risk, what is the objective? The objective is to make sure that anybody who walks through the walls of the university is able to study in an environment that is free of harassment, that is free of any serious cajoling, and at the end of the day, you are able to graduate from the university as a better person than you came. So now, what are the subsequent changes to operations? The aim is to mitigate. So now, students have an avenue for challenging their results, and they are able to write straight to the Vice Chancellor. In fact, the Vice Chancellor of KNUST made his number available to students. So, in fact, we who are even workers, his subordinates, You cannot just call him or send him message freely like that. But you find students firing messages to him directly. It is part of the changes in the operations to make sure that, assuming somebody will even block your complaint, you can complain to the VC directly so that he will kickstart the processes. If you go online, you have the numbers of the chairman of the council of KNUST, so that in the event that, God forbid, it is the VC himself who is involved, you can fire a message to the chairman of council who can call the VC to order. So these are some of the changes to operation. But you see, can we sit down and fold our hands and say, oh, it doesn't happen at KNUST, or KNUST was not mentioned, therefore we should do nothing? No, we can't do that. We definitely have to also begin to do some internal investigations of our own. So, what are the current methods? And for this one, I can say, because I've been an exam officer for a long time, I can say without a doubt that the process put in place, if any student feels that they have been wrongly treated, first, there's a department board that will sit on the results. It is the department board that looks at actual scripts and actual marks. So when we are looking at the marks and we find that somebody's own looks suspicious, we are able to call for the scripts. Of course, some of them may go under the radar. So there's a faculty board. The faculty board will also sit down and look at the results. They may also be able to pick some anomalies. After that, there is a school board. The school board is fewer members, so with more detailed analysis. Then there's a college board. Before there's academic board. Even when all this wrong action, the student has the right to complain and challenge the mark. And the university will give you the respect by asking the examiner to produce the marking scheme, and an independent person outside the university is contracted to mark your paper again. When you get marks that go beyond 5, your grade is changed and the examiner is called where it is clear that the examiner has violated their own marking scheme. And not only your script will be marked, the scripts of other students who have not complained will also be sampled and added to what this person should mark, so that we are able to be sure that the marking scheme was not just applied to your paper, it was applied to everybody's paper. This is a qualitative way of doing it. Then, normally there are suggestion boxes where students are able to give us suggestions on how to improve, and the university comes out with new policies. So now the university has a new policy of sexual harassment, a new policy of student engagement, a new policy of student-lecturer relationship, and so on and so on. What students can do, what lecturers can do, what students cannot do, what lecturers cannot do. Many of you have not even bothered to go look for it. It is there. Search on our website. It is there. Just look at policies of the university and you will see it. Okay. So, this kind of analysis give a very good basis for discussion, and they help us come out with numerous measures of dealing with it. However, don't forget, every process has a limitation, because this one is subjective. So we say that by definition, they are limited by not giving any numerical measures. That is the limitation. So, to deal with this limitation, you can do quantitative analysis. And we say that there are many types of quantitative analysis of risk, but all of them are based on two factors: the likelihood of the risk event occurring and the consequence. And then at the end of the day, you are going to calculate the expected value of the event. I think the insurance companies do a little of this. So when you want to quantitatively analyze any risk, then you are going to look at the expected value of any event. So expected value of risk event, and that is probability or likelihood times consequence or impact. So take for granted that I want to do an analysis of this fan hanging up here. I will look at what happens if this fan should fall to the ground. If looking at this fan, should it fall to the ground, chances are I cannot pick it. So consequence will be the value of the fan. This fan is like 60 cedis. So the consequence is 60 cedis because when the fan falls, I am assuming that when the fan falls, I will not pick it. Maybe the ground, this is tile, where it will fall. The tile will break and the tile will have to be replaced. Maybe it will cost, so this is the fan. It will cost 80 cedis to replace the tile. In that case, the consequence of the fan falling is 140 cedis. This is based on the assumption that it did not fall on anybody and it did not fall on any equipment. If it falls on any equipment, you have to add the cost of that equipment and the damage rate. If it falls on anybody and you spend money curing the person or taking the person to the hospital and all that, you must add it. Now we come to what is the likelihood of this fan falling. So what is the probability? This is now we are going to assess the hang, the hook on which the fan is hanging. We shake the fan small to see to what extent will it fall. If you look at this fan I am looking at, I can put the likelihood of its falling at 10%. So 10%. And remember, 10% is 0.1. 0.1 of 140 is what? So 2 decimal places. Maybe 1 cedi, 40 pesos. 10%, no, 10% is 14 cedis. So that means that the expected value of the fan falling is 14 cedis. So if we have to buy insurance, some companies will look at this amount and charge you premium. I have not been in insurance, and maybe they may have other calculations that they do. But at the basic level, this can be described as the consequence of this fan falling. And when we are going to buy insurance, we can look at this and challenge the insurance company trying to give us cover for our equipment. So if we have 30 fans, then it will be 14 by 30 and so on and so on. I know the insurance companies have their own way of determining it. So just know that the expected value of any event is the probability times the consequence. So when you want to look at the probability of a risk event occurring, the first problem is for you to subjectively look at what can cause it to happen. So the first problem for quantitative analysis is always to find the probability of the risk event occurring, because this some way somehow can only be done subjectively. You can never tell. We can put the chance of this thing falling at 10%, and tomorrow will come and it has fallen. Because something affected the top, and that also affected this. So our analysis, though, was based on the hook and everything, but something external caused it to fall. Now, when values are close to 1, that is near 100%, it means that they are most likely to occur and can define normal operations. So, managers will normally consider this event as part of normal work and make decisions on the basis that they will occur. So, assuming we found that the likelihood of this fund falling was 95%, you can say definitely the fund will occur, the falling will occur. So, it is better you decide as though it has fallen already. So, we say that probabilities that are in the middle, it means that like up to 0.5, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6. It means that they can occur, but they are normal variations to operations. So you make allowances for them. You don't plan like the first one where you are certain they will occur. You plan as though they can occur, and when they do, what do I do? But when they are close to 0, then you should know that this one, they are very rare. What will cause them to occur has to be a serious event. So you sometimes don't include it in your plan. Okay, let me give you a typical scenario, though it's not a popular one. Every day we wake up in the morning, those of us who don't have cars, you go to the trotro or the taxi station or whatever means of transport you intend to take. You are damn sure that accident will not occur, even though you know accident can occur. What plan did you take? How many of you have taken accident cover? Just so that when you are coming to class and there's an accident, you will get some compensation. You only rely on the third party insurance of the transport company. That's all. To the extent that you didn't buy any insurance for yourself means you are placing the likelihood of the occurrence close to 0. But we all know some people leave home and they never go back. They go back on as dead bodies. It's true. It's not because I'm saying it, but we all know it happens. So even though we are placing the probability to 0 and we don't add it to our thinking, it doesn't mean it cannot occur. It can. So what are the approaches that we can use to find these probabilities? Because we have just alluded to the fact that it is very difficult to find a probability. So first, you can use knowledge of a situation to calculate a theoretical or what we call a priori probability, something that is likely to be close to reality. So though we don't have any proof, but theoretically we all know when this thing is this way, okay, you go to a place and wires are hanging all over the place. The switches are looking funny. Some switches are even out of the wall and they are hanging. You will not be wrong if you assume that theoretically a fire can break out over there at any time. And so the probability of the event of fire occurring is high. You put it at high because wires are hanging loosely, and you know all that needs to happen is for 2 wires to touch or to touch. Touch as in T-O-R-C-H. When they touch, that's it. And this touching will come from touching. When the two wires meet, the negative and positive, when they meet, there will be a spark. And that spark can cause a fire. So you are using knowledge of the situation. You can also use historical data. Anytime this has happened, this has resulted. So you see that people say, check your water level, check your oil levels, check your tires. Because we know from experience that, or from historical data, that anytime the tires of cars are worn, the ability to brake is reduced and the chances of accident is high. This one is just past data, historical information. We don't have certainty. that every one tie will cause an accident. But we have found that almost every car that has been involved in an accident, in some cases or in many, many cases, have worn out tires, have worn out brake pads, have water running out, cars that have caught fire. And you find that these days, the accidents are becoming scary. Sorry, because when I was much younger and we were going to school, it was never heard of that two buses will collide and there will be a fire. No. It is when a bus or another vehicle collides a tanker carrying fuel. Even empty tankers don't catch fire. Tankers carrying fuel. Meanwhile, I witnessed an accident on the Accra Road involving a fuel tanker and it never caught fire. Meanwhile, we have two buses crashing and it is catching fire. And it is becoming unbecoming. It's like now it's becoming common that anytime two buses crash, it should burn and people should burn beyond recognition. It is strange. Very, very strange. Then you can ask people for their subjective opinions on the likelihood of the event occurring. So, whatever you are able to determine at the end of the day, the value you will give it out of 100% that you have reduced to decimal gives you a certain interpretation. So, if you score a 0, it means you are saying that there is no way this event can occur. So, it will never occur. If you give it a score of between 0 and 0.25, then what you are saying that it is low and unlikely to occur. However, if you give it a score between 25% and 75%, then there's an average chance of the event occurring. You are acknowledging that that event has the potential of occurring. However, when you give it a score of 75% to 1 to 100 or 99, then you are saying the likelihood of it occurring is very high. It is likely to occur. If you are certain that it will occur, you give it 1. So, let's say, in fact, in my life, I have had several challenges with police officers because of the way they do some of the things. But I witnessed one police officer take an action at airport roundabout in Kumasi, and I respected the police officer so much. I was on my way to Bokrom, and I saw this truck. It was loading wood. This is the articulator truck. It had a Ghanaian registration, but you can tell that it was heading for the north. And it had loaded to the extent that the mate had to be sitting on top, so that when they get to a wire crossing the road, he uses a stick to raise the wire for the car to pass. So when this car got to the airport roundabout, to go to the north at airport roundabout, the airport roundabout has 5. So this goes to the airport. This goes to Abu Abu. This one goes to Krofo. And this one goes to Swan. This one goes to Bokro. So when I saw the policeman stopping the truck here and asking it to park on the Accra end, on the airport road, I was like, oh, why are you bothering this driver? In fact, I didn't like the load because I was following them with my car and you couldn't even see, and the car was extremely unstable. Then I knew in my mind, and I was telling myself that this car will never reach its destination if it continues like this, because you could tell that the axle of the car couldn't just sustain the load. It was shaking seriously. But when these police officers stopped them, I was like, what is this? And then he wants to collect something. I went to book room, and on my way back, the police officer was there, and they were offloading the wood. In fact, I fell in love with the police officer. He was standing there. They had brought another this thing, the Hino truck, this type, and they were offloading the wood into it, clearly demonstrating to them that there is no way he's going to let them cross. And I fell in love with him. I wish all police officers were like that. Because in this case, in fact, the probability of the accident occurring was almost certain. Because our road is not flat. We have situations where we even have 85 degrees. Meanwhile, the road is supposed to be 90. And an asphalt road is supposed to be 90. At worst, 89 point something. But we have 85. So the road itself can cause the accident. So it is important that he made them take it down. It is. And I loved him. Now, then the exact interpretation of this probability depends on the perception of the people, their circumstance, and their corporate culture. So, for example, a risk-averse organization, that's an organization that fears risk, might consider even the 0.25 too harmful. Oh, it's too high. Meanwhile, a risk-taking organization will even consider that 0.7 is even low. So, that's why we are saying that the exact interpretation in real life is dependent on the organization concerned. Because a likelihood of 25% for some is too high. For others, it hasn't even gotten to the point where we have to consider. Now, look at around the world. The chances of being caught when you take cocaine, is it not close to 100? Don't some people take it? They do. It is because for these people, even a likelihood of 92% is still low. You and I will not even dream about it. Because even a risk of 10% with cocaine is too high for us. I don't want to even be found with it or near it. But some people don't care. Some Ghanaians went to Indonesia. 3 of them, and they were executed in Indonesia. You know the reason. On their visas, it is imprinted. Trafficking drugs carries the death penalty. When I went for my Malaysian visa, it was on it. They have imprinted it boldly. Trafficking drugs carry a death sentence. And then these people refused. Even 100% risk didn't make them fear. They still carried cocaine to Indonesia, and they were caught. Ghana government did everything it could to bring them back to Ghana. The Indonesian government said, no way. They executed them in Indonesia. I don't think they even gave us their body. So, now we have evaluated likelihood. Let's look at consequence. Normally, you have to estimate. The consequence, we can do some analysis, notably by multiplying 2 together to calculate an expected value. Normally, like I said, after the consequence, you look at the loss or the gain. So, normally, when risk is analyzed, normally we prioritize the risk. At the top of the list are the most significant risks, and at the bottom are the least significant risks. Most people develop diseases because they underrate the place of illicit sex. So in their order of risk, disease is low, and for other people, disease is very high. So generally, when you have been able to identify likelihood and consequence, like we did with the case of the farm, I told you with consequence, if you are evaluating it, you are looking at, should the event occur, what is going to be lost or what is going to be gained. That is what will tell you what the consequence will be. So if you are thinking of a car getting an accident, the consequence could be that the accident will damage the car completely. So if you do comprehensive, what the insurance company will normally do is look at what value you place on your own car and then use it to calculate your premium. So that in the event that there's an accident that is beyond repair, they will give you that money. So what is expected is that managers should give the highest priority to the risks that are the most significant, especially those that involve lives or significant losses in terms of sales revenue. Now, risks that have a low probability are unlikely to occur, so you pay less attention to them. Even when their consequences are severe, once they are not likely to occur, why do you spend too much time on them? So, you can do the ABC analysis, or you do an ABC analysis of the Pareto rule. Remember, I told you Vilfredo Pareto saw that 80% of the resources of Italy is controlled by 20% of the people. So it became what is called the 80-20 rule. And you can use it to classify risks as A, the most severe, that need the most attention, B, the medium ones that are normal, and C, the ones that need little or no attention at all. So this is different from the ABC, that's the activity-based costing in project management, but it is similar to the ABC in warehouse management, where you classify the goods in according to ABC, those high cost items, medium cost items, and high cost. The ABC as applies to risk management is for you to classify those risks that have high consequence and high likelihood as A. They are severe. The medium ones as B, and then the low ones as C. So this is a risk impact matrix. So look at this matrix very well, and you will find that risks are classified and given colors. Red generally represents danger. Orange will normally represent near danger, and low is mild. But I want you to pay attention to something on this table. You will see that those events that have moderate to catastrophic consequence are high. You see that we are not even paying too much attention to their probability. So those that have moderate consequence to catastrophic consequence are generally high. They are high risk. Then on the probability side, you will see that those that have very high probabilities, or at least high, are the ones that are critical, and so they qualify as A. So I want you to see that from moderate consequence times very high likelihood is equal to significant risk. Take note of that. When will an event that have very low probability be a high risk event? When its consequence is catastrophic. I am doing this detailed analysis so that when you are finished acquiring the knowledge and you have to answer questions, you are able to do this analysis. You will see that for an event with very low likelihood to be equal to significant risk, which is A, then consequence must be catastrophic. So when you look at this table and you appreciate that moderate, serious, critical, and catastrophic consequences go with very high, medium, low, and very low probabilities. Beyond that, you have to be able to tell at what level of consequence will a particular for a particular event to qualify as medium significant risk. What level of consequence must it have, and what level of probability must it have? So you see that if consequence is negligible and minor, so C, you will see that for consequence to be low risk, then the probability of occurrence must be medium or below. It is important to take note of this. So this diagram alone can comfortably give 20 questions. So do the careful analysis, but it tells you the levels at which we describe events as significant risk, medium risk, and low risk. So if we have to do risk analysis, what are some of the tools available to us? The first one of them that we will discuss is the failure mode and effect analysis, FMEA. First, this one starts by you first listing every activity in the supply chain and systematically identifying ways in which it can fail. So, come to our paint business. What are the activities in our supply chain? Sourcing brushes and purchasing them. Sourcing scaffolds and purchasing them, or ladders. Sourcing paint, turpentine. So, you effectively use a process analysis to produce a risk register. So, what is the process? We source and identify the brush owners. Usually, you find that this and these people go together. Paint and turpentine may go together. But here, we are talking about large-scale purchases. Now, when we have identified the process, you identify what you want, place the order, agree on a delivery date, pick. So there's transportation, there is order processing. So we have order processing, we have sourcing, order processing, we have transportation, we have delivery, we have takeover, then we have warehousing, so inventory, warehousing, or storage. Now, what are the risks associated with all these? With sourcing, we know the risks. Identifying the wrong supplier. because you have received the wrong information. Getting the wrong products because there is a misunderstanding between you, the one placing the order, and the one supposed to deliver the order. Now, when you come to ordering, wrong specification, wrong date, wrong days, transportation, challenges with the mode, and so on, delivery, delays, increased lead time, all that, takeover, damages, improper accounting or inventory, in the storage, improper placement, wrong aligning, and so on. So we now take each of them and look at the probability of occurrence and the severity of the consequence. So what is the likelihood that this thing, like wrong specifications, will go? We look at the skill of our worker and know whether they will do a wrong order or not. Then we come to look at our loading staff at takeover, our warehouse staff. We look at all this. So the likelihood that remedial action can be taken before failure becomes critical. So apart from this, that's why it's failure mode and effect analysis. What will cause the failure? How can we prevent or take remedial action so that the failure does not occur? I don't know how many of you have taken planes from Accra to Kumasi or Kumasi to Accra, and you get there and the plane has to return because the conditions for landing are not favorable. The airport can risk it. After all, it is an aircraft and it has a lot of control measures. But many times they don't, because it is a failure mode and effect analysis. Assuming you risk it and the event occurs, what happens? So we are better off taking you back to Accra safely than risking a landing. So in our paint business, when we realize that a mode of transport is cheap, but it can bring us delays, it can also bring us damages, it is better we take remedial action. That is why sometimes you will find that paint is loaded in a whole articulator truck and it is half. Because first it is heavy and the articulator truck has more stability, and it is believed that because it has more axles, the chance of it surviving is higher. However, we don't fill it to the brim, because then the ability of the articulator track to remain stable is compromised. So we prevent, we take remedial action. It is better you engage 2 articulator tracks to bring your consignment than to engage one that will come and never reach, that will come and fall on the way. Then we have scenario analysis. Normally, what you are looking at is possible effect of a series of decisions. So you are painting scenarios. Should this happen? What? What if this does not happen but this happens? What will you do? So as you paint different scenarios, it allows you to think of remedies, actions that you should take. If you look at our national development discourse, one thing that makes me sad is that anytime an opposition party is making complaints or trying to point the government to the right direction, the people in government will normally see them as omanbofo, people just intending to destroy the nation. They don't see them as the critical bits that should come in for us to fine-tune whatever we want to do. We have allowed politics to eat us so much that when you are even giving a suggestion, you are looked at from the standpoint of somebody who hates the system. However, whatever suggestion you give is like a scenario. It's like the questions we ask you in an exam. They are all scenarios. We are painting scenarios to see what you will do if you were in the position of a manager or a worker. So I tell you that assuming an organization wants to produce something, and then it has the option of four distribution channels. Which one should it go after? I have painted a scenario. So you are going to analyze this scenario based on the knowledge of decision making you have learned, and then come out and tell me if this is the decision criteria, this is what they should follow. If this is the decision criteria, this is what they should follow. And at the end of the day, you leave it to the decision of the person who has to make the decision. You leave it to the discretion of the person who has to make the decision. So we say it is essentially qualitative, and it involves designing scenarios using a mixture of expertise, judgment, brainstorming, analysis, and guesswork. So if you are a manager and you can't guess, you can't be a good manager, because there are sometimes that there is no book that will tell you what you should do. You just do it. So what will normally happen is that they identify key features and get an understanding and insight into the options and the events that might lie ahead. Look, these 3 SHS, wonderful idea, wrong implementation. I believe that if we were to put our heads together, then we will have been able to avert the traffic system. You may agree with me or you may not agree with me, but think of it, there are scenarios. We can look at several options. Look, private schools are complaining. They have structures that are not used. Couldn't government have rented these private schools for some time, for a year or so, while we build the ones we need? That's one scenario. You may not like it. Okay, what about the government stopping the buying of land cruisers and building the schools? Is school not built with money? That is another scenario. Why don't we stop building roads, stop building bridges, stop building hospitals, and make sure we provide all the classrooms that the students need to learn? That is another scenario. Think about it. So there are different scenarios, there are different options that we could have looked at. Even the current one, the gold, the green, is also a scenario, an alternative. You can go into whether it is the best or not. But I believe by now you know my opinion. It is not the best. But in the mind of the government and the decision makers, that is the best scenario that they can take. Then we have simulation. Simulation goes further than scenarios because it gives a detailed quantitative analysis of the events that might occur. So I simulate. That's why in the army, when they want to look at how they can rescue a very important person, they don't do scenarios. They don't think of scenarios. No, they look at real life. So they now get one of them to act as the most important person who has been kidnapped. Then they want to look at what is the nature of the kidnapper. What are the things that the kidnapper has? This one in real life. So you see them in some cases introducing ammo cars for the kidnapper. So the kidnapper has a fighting power. Then they look at how much power should they also use to overcome the power that this kidnapper has. So that is simulation. You simulate. So if you look at our painting jobs, there is simulation. Sometimes when you are not sure how the paint will look at on the building or what, we have wood, cement that has been painted with that color you want to use, so that it gives you a visual impression. Or you can go and get a cardboard, create a wall-like situation, paint it for the client to see. Sometimes you use a computer to create the real operation and see how it will look like. So simulation goes beyond scenario analysis because it introduces reality, some level of reality into the analysis. Then we have network models, and supply chains are usually described in terms of networks because they connect different nodes. Wholesaler is a node, supplier is a node, manufacturer is a node. So the whole series of analysis is concerned with the flow through the network and often described in terms of graph theory. The graph theory looks at what is the maximum flow. what is the maximum flow. So I'm just going to give you a simplistic form of the graph theory. So I have the manufacturer sitting here. I have the suppliers sitting here. I have wholesalers, distributors. I have distributors sitting here. I have retailers. And then I have the consumers. So we are looking at the flow between these people. Now, you are going to be always looking at how much flow is between them. The idea is that you want to get the maximum amount of material that can first move between 2 points in the network. Then you look at the shortest path to the shorter, and then so your aim there is to find the shortest travel time or minimum distance between points in a network. Then you look at transportation problem. So you assign customers to facilities such as warehouses to give faster or lowest cost deliveries. Then you set a covering. You will want to show the location of facilities needed to make sure that every customer is within a specific maximum distance. This comes with the location theory. That is why sometimes you find that when governments have to locate social amenities, you may think that the government is insensitive, but they try to calculate a place that is equidistant to the endpoints. Then we do facility locations to show the location of the facility that gives the lowest average distance to almost everybody within a particular geographical coverage. Thank you very much. If you have any challenge, you can contact elearning@knusc.edu.gh and elearning@knusc.com. Usually at this point, I normally ask the class to do a network flow analysis of our paint business. Please, this is an assignment we will discuss in the last video, but go and do it before you come to watch the video on the answer. So you are looking at the maximum flow, you are looking at the shortest path, you are looking at the transportation problem, you are looking at the set covering, and you are looking at the facility location. Make sure you do this. We are stationed in Kumasi. So our station is Kumasi, and we are going to receive our supplies from any part of Ghana that has it. Okay.